This is me. I'm Nat. I'm one of the TIACS psychologists that work at TIACS, and this is Raquel.
Hello.
And we're on the phone line during the week. So if you call 0488 46988, you'll get Raquel, all right? Now, this webinar is basically something that we're seeing a lot of in our clients. People who are cheating, people who are going through separation. It's an incredibly difficult issue to deal with. It's also very difficult for the person who is cheating. There's a lot of stuff that has led up to that as well. So we're trying to do both sides of the coin here, just not one side. So as usual, this webinar is funded by CSQ. So thank you, CSQ, for your time and your contribution to let us, give this information during the week.
Yeah, so let's get started.
Yeah.
Okay, so what is infidelity?
Well, infidelity is basically anything a promise that you've made to another person. That can be a marriage vow. It can be also some type of privately uttered agreement that you have. There's lots of different ways that people see fidelity, and there's different boundaries that people have. This is a couple by couple basis, but most of us in the West see an engagement of a sexual activity as infidelity. And it often raises these really thorny questions. Should you stay? Can you trust? Can you rebuild? Or is there a choice to just not pack up and stay? Do I move on? It's a lot more complicated than just, oh, he cheated, I'm leaving. There's a lot of other stuff that's involved. And what Raquel and I in our next video have actually used the services of Esther Perel to explain the complexity of infidelity. She's one of the most famous relationship counselors. She travels the world. She actually lives in New York. But we've just got a short snippet of what she finds when she's dealing with couples with infidelity. So here we go.
Hello, I'm Esther Perel, and I have been a couples therapist in New York City for the past 30 years. And for the past 10, I've also traveled the globe and worked extensively with hundreds of people who have been shattered by an infidelity. When I say that I work on infidelity, people will often ask me for or against, as if there are only two options. The dilemmas of love and desire are way too complex to yield simple answers of good and bad, and victim and perpetrator, and right and wrong. It is a moral dilemma for many people, even people who actually act on their transgressions. Affairs have happened since marriage was invented, and they're not going away. So what we need is an approach that embraces the complexity of it and helps people deal with it if it happens and when it happens, rather than flat out condemnations. Now, because I don't condemn doesn't mean I justify. I seek to understand, and I seek to help people manage the combination, the contradictory emotions that will often emerge in the aftermath of a revealed affair. I also think that if partners were able to speak long before an affair happens about some of the questions in their relationship, about the sexual frustrations in their relationships, about their loneliness, about the way they feel neglected, about the many other kinds of betrayal for that matter, contempt, indifference, ignoring. Many of these conversations do not happen in the couple. And even when one partner tries to bring it up, they are often met by another partner who kind of disregards it. Unfortunately, people have often tried to have these conversations, and sometimes it is the affair that catches their partner's attention. Until then, they couldn't get an ear. I have never recommended anybody to have an affair, but for that matter, nobody asks permission when they cheat. The entire endeavor is an act of entitlement, of selfishness for oneself. That is very clear. That's why some people agonize about it so much, asking, what right do I have to do something for me that is going to have such a devastating effect on others? But if an affair happens, some couples will separate, and some couples will stay together.
So as you can see, it's basically not as simple as just somebody having an affair. There's usually a lot of things that have happened first. Now, people have different lines of betrayal, which I discussed earlier, and we're just going to go through them quickly now, because what one person feels is cheating, another person doesn't see that as cheating at all. So there's a thing called micro-cheating, which is basically when a partner is flirting with another co-worker or a neighbour that's attractive. Sometimes that can cause a hell of a lot of sexual frustration with the other person. They say they never treat me like that, they never look at me like that, and that can feel like a betrayal if that person's spending a lot of time. And also sexual fantasies, Raquel.
Yeah, so while many experts may believe sexual fantasies are about other people, if they're not acted on and don't become a fixation, they're not necessarily unhealthy for a relationship, and they may even help to maintain sexual energy and interest. But this obviously depends on what the other partner thinks as well. So some people may find the revelation of a sexual fantasy from their partner to be an absolute betrayal. So it really does depend. It's about perception.
Yeah, exactly. And also pornography, there's a whole heap of research that a lot of women find this really problematic in their relationship, and they feel that their partner isn't sexually attracted to them when they're looking at other people, having sex, and they feel like it's a real betrayal. And there's also emotional infidelity, and this is basically when somebody is spending a lot of time with another person. They may not actually be having sex or a sexual affair, but they're actually having what they call an emotional affair, where they're spending a lot of time, and this can cause an incredible amount of tension in a relationship as well. So there's some individual risk factors to separation.
Yes, so addiction. So as with most substance abuse, addiction kind of lowers your inhibition. So if people, take alcohol or other drugs, they're more likely to be less inhibited, therefore more likely to act on their urges. So alcohol in particular can reduce inhibitions.
And you all know the boss who ended up with a co-worker or both at a party, and it was a bit of alcohol drinking. So yes.
Also people's attachment style. So some attachment styles, such as an avoidant or insecure attachment style, they may have intimacy issues. So it may be hard for them to form that bond to begin with. And so then for them, having an affair it's not something that doesn't come as unnaturally. If they also have poor self-esteem and insecurity, this can also raise the risk. That's a better way to put it. Raise the risk of a level of an affair.
Exactly. And childhood trauma, if there's any sort of neglect, often these people struggle with attachment, and there's sort of an ability to try and attach to somebody else. So childhood trauma often has a higher level of wanting to actually have sexual relations with other people, just because, and it's more of an intimacy. They struggle with intimacy in their relationships. Exposure to infidelity in childhood. So if your parents have had an affair, it's somewhat highly likely that the person or the child may have an affair. Obviously not completely an outcome, but just a risk factor.
And also another risk factor is mental illness. So some mental illnesses such as bipolar disorder, particularly when they're in their manic stage, are at risk for cheating in the marriage. These people have a lot lower inhibition, so they're more likely to act on these urges than they would normally if they weren't in a manic stage.
Yeah, manic and bipolar is huge, isn't it, Raquel? So previous cheating. So people who have cheated before are 3 times more likely to actually cheat again, and that's been in a study in 2007, but also a recent study in 2017 also has said that as well. And also psychological issues such as narcissism or personality disorders are likely with cheating. So narcissism is basically this sense of entitlement, and they lack empathy. So they're just more likely to have an affair than somebody who doesn't have that sense of entitlement.
And also sex addiction. So, you know, sex addiction in one partner increases the chance that they'll be unsatisfied with the physical aspect in their relationship. So therefore they're more likely to look elsewhere. You've all heard of Tiger Woods and that affair with his sex addiction.
Yeah, exactly. So look, when you're looking at your relationship, is your relationship at risk of having an affair? Obviously, domestic violence and emotional abuse is a huge one, but it's not a common factor. But emotional disconnection is. So if there's no romantic intimacy in your relationship, that's a huge risk factor for infidelity.
And also that physical disconnection. So it's when the relationship becomes more like friends rather than romantic partners. That's a big risk factor for having one of the partners look elsewhere to fill that void, to fill that need.
Or if you're a woman, you're not emotionally, you know, there's no I love you, there's no sense of, you
emotional
know,
connection.
Yeah. So financial pressures, huge. So if you're under stress, sometimes there's a lot of fighting, which causes tension, which then causes somebody to try and get comfort from another person with that hostility.
Yes, lack of communication, this is a big one. I mean, as that video alluded to, you know, not being able to communicate with your partner to get the attention or the love that people want from their partner can often lead them to seek that elsewhere. And that lack of communication is a very big risk factor.
Yeah. Lack of respect is a huge one. Men often talk about this. My wife doesn't respect me. And the person working for him is showering him with respect and love. And that's a fairly attractive one for a lot of males. If they feel like their wife isn't respecting them, often somebody who is just highly attractive at that point.
And also low compatibility. So, you know, if it's just gotten to the stage where your relationship is just a friendship, but you're fighting all the time, your personalities are too different, you know, it may be that the relationship may be close to the end, and then the infidelity is that last straw. And
with the low compatibility, there's often, some people get married for the wrong reasons, and they actually didn't have that much in common to start with. So that's actually a bit of a problem, and sometimes the divorce actually maybe it will end in divorce, which may be a good thing. Maybe that wasn't a relationship that should have really been started in the beginning. So just some statistics.
The difference, I guess, between males and females as well in this slide here.
So about 16% of adults, about 20% of men and 13% of women have actually had a premarital affair. And what we've found is about 11% of women report having committed infidelity and 10% of men under 30. So it looks like it's evening out as the population gets younger. And we could talk about the reasons for that, not in this webinar, but it does seem that infidelity isn't just a male issue now. It's women and men in the younger years are both doing it the same. So basically the other research is, look, it's a fairly cultural thing. So basically that was an Australian statistic. Italian men are more likely to have affairs, with 30% of Italian women opposed to 59% of Italian men having an affair, whereas 1/5 of British women would admit to having an affair and half of British men. So we're looking at very different cultural you know, nuances with having an affair. But the most common reason for infidelity is basically emotional satisfaction for women and
sexual satisfaction for men. So, and typically when they talk about the infidelity in therapy, the male will describe the sexual satisfaction and the sexual aspects of it, and the woman will describe the emotional aspects of it. So, and typically as well, a male will still have a lot of respect for his wife and love his wife. It was just a sexual thing, whereas typically a female has that disconnect from her partner before she or when she engages in that infidelity. It's a way for the female to justify it.
Yeah, and look, it is only a statistic. Obviously, most men want emotional connection too. Yes. So basically, when they've asked an adulterer why they had an affair, often they'll say it's exciting, seductive, it confers reasons of renewal, rejuvenation, joy. These are all some of the reasons that they've basically said that they've betrayed their partner, but it doesn't really fix the fact that they've just betrayed someone who's now confused and angry and doubts themselves and is in a lot of pain. So whatever rejuvenation you get and joy you get, I don't think it's worth the pain that is inflicted on the partner. So these are some of the main reasons why people cheat. So
unhappiness and dissatisfaction. So when the marriage is either emotionally or sexually not really satisfying, this is something that can be a trigger point for people to cheat. A sexless marriage is often claimed as a reason for both men and women. Men claim it for the physical side, and women usually claim it for that emotional connection.
Yeah, and feeling unappreciated. So similar to what we were discussing before with that lack of respect, if you don't feel appreciated in your relationship and you don't validate that person's sense of worth, often, you know, you'll go and look elsewhere to feel appreciated. And this is quite common. People live with these feelings every day. And as Esther Perelli said before, is a lot of this feeling of betrayals happened before the actual betrayal.
Yes. And then a lack of commitment. So everything else aside, a 2018 study found that people who are less committed to their relationships are more likely to cheat.
Yeah. Boredom. Sometimes we get to that stage where we just want something exciting. And this is quite common. Body image and aging. You often see men who say his wife has let himself go, or a man has put on a lot of weight, so she's no longer attracted to him. There's a lot of that type of factors that go on.
And there's also revenge. So if one partner has had an affair in the past and the relationship continued, then maybe months or years down the track, the other partner may elicit an affair when the opportunity presents itself as an act of revenge, because there wasn't actually forgiveness at that time.
Exactly. And there's we're going to go through some secondary reasons, but the internet's actually having a real effect on infidelity. We're seeing a lot more online cheating. So there's lots more availability to connect with people worldwide. And it doesn't feel like cheating when you're, you know, doing sexual things in front of somebody on a screen. So
That's
infidelity, internet infidelity is absolutely becoming a huge thing.
And there's more, exactly as you mentioned, there's more access to more people that you would normally not have access to were it not for the internet.
And there's a secondary reason. Sometimes somebody's not around very much. Like if your husband or your wife or your partner just travels a lot, there's much more ability to be able to have an affair. You might miss them, you just want comfort. So that's a secondary reason that people have affairs.
Also as well, if there were poor boundaries or limits that were in place as to what was considered acceptable and unacceptable. So this can increase the chance that an affair will occur. So people who find it hard to say no, or people pleasers, they find themselves in an affair when they didn't intend to. It just kind of happened.
And again, pornography, it's a secondary thing. Some people see it as a form of cheating, and actually it can break down the marriage, and it can break down intimacy issues as well.
Yeah, I think there's two factors here. So there's the factors where a lot of the females would look at pornography just viewing pornography as cheating, but then also for males, they may seek to act out what they're seeing in the pornography, so then they may seek that outside of the relationship as well.
And it might destroy intimacy, or it might create pressure for the other partner to do things that they're not willing to do. So basically, is the relationship going to last? And what basically the statistics are saying, was there emotional attachment as well as sex? So basically, in one survey, 44% of men who had affairs said it was only about sex, but only 11% of women reported the same. So often, if there's emotional attachment, that's when people go, oh, this is a bit scary. I don't know if I can take you back if you're emotionally attached to the person.
Yes, that's correct.
Yeah, but if it's just straight sex, often people go, okay, well, we can work with that.
So how do people cope with infidelity? So there are numerous consequences once the infidelity comes to light. So for the person on the receiving end, the person who, got cheated on, along with loss of trust, their partners admitting extramarital relationships, often find the relationships with other family members get impacted as well. So, it might include parents and children. So there's a lot of other people to consider, not just the romantic partner that get affected when infidelity comes to light. There's also emotional problems such as reduced self-esteem, feelings of betrayal, depression, and anger. And so given all the damage that can arise, not just with the romantic spouse, but with other family members, it's hardly surprising that infidelity remains the most frequent cited cause for divorce.
Oh, it is. So that's the number one reason. And should it be the number one reason? That's the question. Is there's obviously a lot of other things that you can do in a marriage that is betrayal, not just infidelity. So should you end the relationship, Raquel?
Oh, yeah. So if there's been infidelity, there's two options really. And the first option is to end the relationship. So some people can walk away from years of marriage and actually feel really relieved. It may be that they weren't compatible to begin with. It may be that there were domestic violence issues. It may be that, the relationship was coming to a natural end. And so this is just a natural progression. The affair was the final straw that broke the camel's back. But then there are also some people who can feel really hurt, when the relationship was only a few months young or something like that. So it really depends on the situation and on the relationship.
Yeah.
So whatever the situation, there's always grief. So at the end of any relationship, whether it be due to infidelity or whatever reason, there's always a grief of the loss of the relationship. So some say there's two stages. There are stages to recovery, but these are actually linked to the stages of grief. So you have denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and then acceptance. And this really does make sense because after all, a breakup is first and foremost grieving about the end of a relationship.
Yeah, and it doesn't have to be just the end of the relationship. It actually can be grieving the person that you thought that they were. And so often there's a grief that has to happen before that person can accept that person back. And they go through this type of thing. Who was this person? I never thought that they'd cheat on me. It's redefining the terms of who that person is in the other person's head even.
Yes, that's very true.
Yeah.
So usually the first thoughts that come up in the person who's been cheated on is often they want a desperate need for answers. So they usually need to know who, what, when, how, why. So then after that is usually the denial and the bargaining and the anger. And so often this, goes around in circles, round and round, just like the stages of grief. And it's important to note that you really do need some self-compassion because breakups hurt the way they do because your brain actually processes this social rejection or this, social loss, just like an actual physical injury to your body. When people say your heart's broken, well, it's actually kind of true. Your brain actually processes it as an injury. That's why it's so difficult for a lot of people to get over an ex-partner, because neurologically you experience it the same as withdrawal from an addictive drug. People talk about how love is, an addictive drug. Well, the withdrawal of it is really painful. So it's really important to have that self-compassion.
Yeah, you do get a reduction of oxytocin, that connective neurotransmitter, and you're left with cortisol and adrenaline, and stress. So there's a lot of stress involved. So dying of a broken heart,
it's actually not as unrealistic as what it seems.
Yeah, there's a lot of stuff going within your body, isn't there?
Absolutely.
And look, relationships can survive after infidelity. As we said, if we're willing to stop and realize there's obviously been other injuries in the relationship which happened way before the infidelity started, and it just depends on the circumstance. We're not talking about a drunken night here, where somebody accidentally sleeps with somebody else, which might be easily forgiven. When you're looking at an affair that's been going on for 3 years that you've just found out about, this is an incredible thing to have to deal with in a relationship.
Exactly. And this is what you were talking about before in the previous slide, when there's been an emotional attachment. So when it's been going on for a few years, it's a lot harder for the other partner to accept and forgive. But what's really important is that in order for the relationship to stay, in order for the forgiveness to happen, the affair actually has to stop. They can't continue, and it has to be brought out into the open, and it has to be dealt with. Oftentimes when people deny the affair, that really inhibits the ability to move on in the relationship.
Yeah, and we're going to go on to some of those reasons too, and what the process is for the person to reconnect.
Yeah, so one of the factors is so having this ability to differentiate yourself from your partner is actually one of the key personality factors. So if you were able to see yourself as an individual away from the relationship, then that helps to be able to overcome and sustain the relationship. So that elicits lower trauma and a higher level of post-traumatic growth. So forgiveness and post-traumatic growth, these are the important factors, and these are the important things required for recovery from infidelity.
Yeah, and so what that means is, who were you before this relationship? What did you like before? Were you involved, I don't know, with motocross racing? Lots of different things that you might have defined yourself before the relationship.
And being able to keep that definition of who you are allows, if you're very enmeshed in the relationship, you're very enmeshed, it's all about we, and you consider your partner to be part of you, it's very hard for those people to be able to move on. But if you have your own separate identity, it's actually one of the factors that show it's easier to move on.
Yeah, exactly. And look, it's difficult not to become enmeshed. We've got families.
Absolutely.
We've brought up children.
Absolutely. And depending how long the relationship went for, like 20, 30 years.
You have to refine and redefine yourself.
Exactly.
Incredibly important. So basically, if you're somebody who has basically hurt the other partner, we start by saying stop cheating. Sounds really obvious.
But that was exactly what I said in the other slide, is that the affair has to stop, and you have to be open and honest about it. But that's the number one thing. You can't expect your partner to forgive if the behavior is still ongoing.
And stop lying. So basically, don't try and justify the adultery. There's no justification for cheating. Just come clean. This is what I've done. This is what I was doing. The lying has to stop, because the problem with affairs, it's not just the sexual engagement, it's the lying that went along with that. There's a lot of, I'm just going down here, I'm just working late. There's hundreds and hundreds of small betrayals.
Yes, and that's often, rebuilding that trust is a key to be able to stay in a relationship. So if the lies are continuing, the ability to rebuild trust is quite low. Yeah,
exactly. And don't blame your spouse, accept the responsibility. You still have a choice, even though there was lots of other stuff beforehand. you know, you have to basically take responsibility for the affair itself. A marriage counsellor will basically go through some of the other aspects, but blaming your partner for your actions is not going to create a renewed relationship. And there's a lot of trust that needs to be rebuilt with that partner.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And make the decision. So find out if your spouse does want to stay married or together. And if you both want to save your marriage, then there is a possibility that the marriage could continue if you both have a common goal. But both of you need to be committed to the hard work, and it will be hard work. It's not just a question of admitting it and moving on.
Exactly. And that starts with being honest with yourself and your spouse to move forward and untangle the web of lies. There's going to be lots and lots of conversations that come up. Oh, when you work late, were you there? And that's going to be very, very difficult. Were you at that work meeting for 3 days? Or, you know, were you with the other person? These are little tiny betrayals that have been opened up as the affair starts to be announced. So keeping your promises. If you're going to say you're going to be there, you're going to have to be very, very dependable. This person who you've been breaking a lot of promises are now going to have to rebuild trust with you. So keeping promises during the infancy of trying to build a relationship is probably paramount.
Absolutely. And be open and patient. Just understand your partner's trust level is going to be very, very low. So you need to be open. Tell your spouse where you are, who you're with. These might have been things that you normally didn't have to do. Your partner may not have asked so many questions before, but you really need to be understanding that because of the betrayal of the trust, all of a sudden things that didn't bother your partner may now bother your partner. You may have to give them access to your mobile phone, whereas previously you didn't. Things like that.
And that's again communication. You've got to have to be able to be willing to talk and listen to a lot of these things. You can't be fobbing them off. They're going to be sitting there wondering, thinking. Communication is going to be the most important thing while you're trying to rebuild.
Don't get defensive when they ask lots of questions.
And give your spouse some space. They're going to be really emotionally triggered by you right now.
Absolutely.
And so they're going to need some cool down space to just sit and be with them and work out what this means for them.
And you know, half the thing is a lot of people don't like to see their spouse upset, but you know, this part of the healing process is to allow your spouse to get upset. You know, be with them, allow them to express themselves, even if that triggers more guilt. That's part of the healing process, and that's part of the process where it may help your partner to want to stay with you.
And spend time. So try to organize some special nights, plan dates, get getaways together, organize this on each other's terms. But this is a part of reconnecting. It's an incredibly important part. And
also as well, like to be aware that even if you do all of these things, sometimes the marriage might be irreparable. And remember, it always takes two. So don't expect that if you do all these things, then automatically your spouse will forgive you. That's something important to note.
So professional help, if your spouse says, I want to get marriage counselling, the answer is definitely yes. Saying no basically says you don't really want to rebuild this marriage. So incredibly important for somebody who's objective and who understands the dynamics of relationships to actually help you guys untangle this web together. It's important to get that objectivity, because sometimes you just can't be. You're just so enmeshed in the pain. Professional help is very, very needed in these times.
Absolutely. And also you need to forgive yourself. So this doesn't mean that you can let yourself off the hook. But it does mean that you don't have to carry buckets of guilt for the rest of your life. If
you don't let yourself off the hook, then you can't be open and vulnerable with your relationship. So I don't think your spouse wants this sort of, you know, constant beating yourself up. You'll end up getting depression. They want happy you. So that's part of it. Forgiveness for each other, forgiveness for self. So there's four
in
stages
terms
of
which,
forgiveness.
well, yeah. So the first stage of forgiveness is actually recognizing that forgiveness is an option. So though it often takes time for a partner who feels betrayed to reach this point, the angry rumination, the angry feelings will eventually subside, and then there will be the possibility of moving on. But the very first step is to actually recognize that, okay, yep, this is an option, I can possibly do this. Also, this goes for both the person that cheated and the person who was cheated on, is accepting that the pre-infidelity relationship did have flaws. So it's not kind of looking at it like our relationship was perfect beforehand and then you cheated and it ruined absolutely everything. It's being able to be realistic and recognize that perhaps there were issues. Perhaps this is an opportunity to fix a lot of those issues, particularly around communication.
And expressing the feelings of hurt and betrayal is an important dialogue that needs to go on to help that endless rumination about negative feelings. We want to start bringing those up and cognitively being able to process those feelings.
Yes.
So learning how to express this in a productive way is part of the forgiveness process.
Absolutely, absolutely. And as we were talking about before with the identity, so recreating your own self-image into something that can provide a new direction for the future.
Yeah.
That's very important.
Yeah, and it's actually important even in relationships when you see yourself getting a mesh. This is actually quite dangerous.
Yes.
You know, partners die. There are things that do happen. We all have to be individuals within a relationship. So
that's a very good point.
Yeah, and if you find yourself getting like that, it's important to make sure you have your friends that are your friends and his
and
friends
your hobbies that are your hobbies.
Exactly. So
what are some of the therapy that, you know, do you see a psychologist or a counselor? How will they help? So we're going to talk about one method, which is acceptance and commitment therapy, and we're going to talk about how that can be used for relationships. So when we talk about how acceptance and commitment therapy can be used for relationships, we talk about value-orientated actions. So it's about living to your values and then doing actions that are aligned with your values. So in a relationship, it's really about sitting down and asking yourself the difficult questions such as, well, who do I want to be in a relationship? So, you know, let's go through a scenario. So suppose your partner suddenly turned into your perfect soulmate. All of a sudden they're absolutely perfect.
No annoying habits.
No annoying habits, nothing at all, just complete perfection.
Which never happens, by the way. Raquel's making this up.
No, I'm making this up. But the reason why I'm making this up is so that it's creating a scenario where your partner is not at fault at all. So now you can look at yourself, just yourself. So how would you change? So oftentimes people would say, well, I would stop doing this if my partner didn't do that.
Yeah.
Or I would be able to do this if my partner didn't do that. So that's why we've created this image of the perfect partner.
And just remember, nobody can control their partner. I've been trying to control my husband for 15 years now and he still doesn't listen, just saying. So you've got to basically, what would you stop, start, do more or less of? What sort of partner would you try to become, and what sort of personal qualities would you develop in yourself to be that partner?
Exactly.
And it's constantly asking how you can change things, because unfortunately we do not have the steering wheel in other people's lives.
Exactly, which is why it's like, who do you want to be in a relationship?
Yeah, exactly. What character strengths do you wish to employ or develop? These are all questions that we ask. What do you want to behave or act on an ongoing basis?
What do you want to stand for as a partner? And what attitude would you like to cultivate with your partner? How would you speak to them?
And often I ask clients things like, what would your partner say about you? What would your 10 most desirable qualities or values would be? What would your partner say about you if I asked them? And these are things to think about, because we often have a lot to talk about what their actions are, but we don't think about
what our actions are.
Yeah.
And that's what we can control. We can control our actions. We cannot control other people's actions. Exactly.
Yeah.
So when you have this reflection, think, is there a gap between the way that you would ideally like to behave as a partner, the values you'd like to live by, and then the way you actually are behaving at the moment? So what's stopping you from living those values right now? What do you fear might happen if you start to live more aligned with your values?
And do you think your partner should change before you do? If you're waiting for, you might be waiting for a long time.
Well, that's why this scenario in acceptance and commitment therapy talks about having this ideal partner. So it's all about you being able to make these changes first, aligned with your values.
So if you expected your partner to change something, Raquel, what would you expect your partner to do? So if you're sitting there waiting for them to make the first move, these are sort of questions that you have to ask of yourself, because they may never, ever change.
That's right.
We've got to, you've just got to be cognizant of that, I guess.
Absolutely. And then another thing that acceptance and commitment therapy talk about is creating a forgiveness ritual.
Yeah, I like this.
Yeah, so many couples do find it very healing to create their own forgiveness ritual. You can use your own creativity and adapt this worksheet into something more personal. Or you can just follow through. We'll go through it right now. So step 1 is you complete these 3 sentences. The thoughts, the feelings and memories I've been holding on to are, and this is the negative thoughts and feelings and memories. So you write these down, your difficult thoughts, feelings and memories.
This is step 1.
And then looking at how holding on to all of this hurt has hurt the relationship. So understanding and identifying how holding on to these difficult thoughts and feelings have hurt the relationship. Then it's about having the desire to want to build a better relationship based on the following values.
Yeah, and that's step 1. So, you know, if you're writing this down, you know, it's a good little ritual to go through. So step 2 is write in your own words a commitment to let all these painful thoughts and feelings come and go again and again, no matter how many times they come back, without holding on to them or getting caught up into them. And we're going to do an exercise on that. So it's not trying to avoid them, it's not holding them so close, just allowing them to just notice as those feelings are coming up, and noticing as they're drifting away, and saying, I'm noticing the feeling about, and then that goes, I'm noticing another feeling. Just acknowledging what you're feeling on a daily basis is important.
Absolutely, and not getting hooked on it, just allowing it to be, making space for it and allowing it to move on. So step 3, choosing a special place and reading your answers aloud to each other. After all, this is about relationships. So this can be anywhere from a special room in your house, or a park, or a place that was sentimental to you, maybe the place that you got proposed to. And as one partner reads, the other listens mindfully and compassionately. Very important.
And discuss this in advance. Write down what you're going to do. And it's actually an important ceremony. It's a good process to go through.
Yes. So the last step 4 is to do something that symbolizes starting over. For example, perhaps you would burn the letters and scatter the ashes. So burning this letter of all the things that you are holding on to, all the resentment, all the anger, and letting it burn. So some people talk about if it's smoky, then it was something that was, you know, took a while for you to process. If it burns instantly, then it's something that you're ready to let go of.
Yeah, there's different ceremonies. Ceremony is very, very important. And step 5, do something to connect lovingly. For example, maybe a kiss or a hug, go out to dinner or have a bath together, and discuss this in advance and write it down. So that's the last step, sort of that reconnection. Whatever you both feel that is important for you to do to connect at the last stage. And we're going to go through basically another one of those difficult thoughts and feelings and how to handle them. So obviously when someone's had an affair, you're left with this incredible emotional discord that happens within yourself. And what we do is we do this thing called dropping an anchor, which we do every week, which means it anchors you from the storm and allows you to cope with this tsunami of emotions that you're having. And Raquel's,
without getting washed away
or getting swept away by this.
Right.
I sometimes call this getting a grip with some of my patients, because it's basically getting a grip of your emotions at that moment. So Raquel's going to go through this
exercise, and it's called dropping anchor with painful memories. So we thought that was appropriate for this webinar. Okay, so first thing, I want you to get comfortable and to acknowledge that there's a painful memory showing up for you. So the first step is to acknowledge what's here.
Mm-hmm.
Then I want you to put your feet hard into the floor. Mm-hmm. Really feel that floor beneath you pushing back. Mm-hmm. And now straighten your back and sit forward in your chair. Mm-hmm. I want you to really feel the chair beneath you. Feel it supporting your back. Feel it supporting your lower half. And now wriggle your fingers and shrug your shoulders and nod your head. And I want you to say to yourself at this moment, I'm noticing that there is a memory. I'm noticing the painful memory. So again, push those feet into the floor. Straighten up, wriggle your fingers and move your neck from side to side. And say to yourself, I'm noticing, or here it is, here's the painful memory of when ABC happened. So I want you to notice here that there is this difficult memory and it's here and you didn't ask for it. And at the same time, I want you to notice your body. Notice your hands, notice your feet, notice your back. And I want you to notice that you have control of your body. And you also are here in this present moment right now. So I want you to look around and see 5 things that you can see. The 5 things you can see now.
I can see a picture, some writing on a board, some books, a phone, some pens. Is that 5?
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
And what about 3 or 4 things that you can hear?
I can hear the fan, and I can hear buzzing of the lights and your breathing.
And speaking of my breathing, I want you to notice that there's you and I, and we're working together. Mm-hmm. So again, I want you to notice that you still do have your memory. Mm-hmm. You still do have your painful memory of a time when ABC happened. Mm-hmm. I want you to notice that in addition to this memory, you have your body. You have complete control of your body. Mm-hmm. You have your chair. I want you to move around. Mm-hmm. And notice around your body, there's a room. Mm-hmm. And around this room, there's you and I working together. So there is the memory, but there's also a body. There's also this present moment, and there's also you and I working together as a team.
Excellent. And it's an easy exercise just to sort of anchor yourself, push your feet into the floor. Notice your feelings in your bodies, notice your thoughts and what they're doing, and then bring yourself to the present moment. Mm-hmm. And sometimes doing that 3 or 4 times a day, or sometimes people have to do it every half hour while they're going through some pain. Yeah. It's a process that you learn to accept those emotions going through you, and not wanting to go and drink or trying to
avoid them. Yeah. Yes, and trying to distract yourself from them is very important. And also noticing that, your thoughts are often either about a future that you're worried about, or something that you're really depressed about. It's not usually in the here and now. Exactly. So when you're in the here and now, it's actually a safe spot.
It is. And look, we are here on 0488 469 88. It's a free service. We offer proper psychological help. If you do find that you're having difficulty in your relationships, please call us. We're here to help.
Or any other matter is.
Exactly. Yeah. Any other matter that you're struggling with, we can help. And thanks, CSQ.